tell us about growing up, Charlie, because you're like me, you're an old bugger now. So
Well, I'll start back at the real beginning, because one of the curious exercises that I did in my 20s was I was able to remember that before I was born, I heard sounds while still inside my mom. And this has been a seminal experience for me because I was aware of voices outside of her, which is, I later, when I was born and heard voices in the world, I recall this experience and
wow.
me on me until I was in and doing this kind of exploration of memory and music is a kind of I think of music, by the way, as a form of transportation.
Mm.
And I think that all of what we're doing, since music is time based, we go from one point in space time to another point, and that's we're all um, driving on that road or flying that path or however you would describe it, and that the vibrations over time spell our life, and also that's what we share with others. So for me, what alerted me to this was hearing voices, not knowing what in the world that was. I could, my mother, of course, has had a deep and strong voice, so I heard her voice. But most of what you hear when you're a child, if you've heard any recordings of inside, you hear digestive sound, heartbeats, and curiously enough, I did a recreation of this experience for German radio many years ago. And what I did was I had two heartbeats. When you are a fetus, your heartbeats
Yeah,
there. Once it turns on, it goes tick 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 like the fast wheel in a watch. And then your mom's doing doo doom, and whatever state your mom's in, you know that immediately. Later on, you know whether she's angry or happy or whatever. You never knew what that was as an unborn child. It was all a mystery that would unfold. But all these sonic cues, set me up for the journey that I've been on because of somehow figuring out what these sounds meant. You know, that was the trigger.
wow. And both your parents were psychiatrists, is that right?
That's right. Both of them medical doctors and psychiatrists. And one of the
How do you think that affected your early development?
well, I think it. First of all, they were being doctors. It affected my early development by the fact that the Second World War began, and I was born a couple of months later, and my father went off to war as an army doctor a month later. So I became a solo child at the age of 3 months, 2, 3 months. And so immediately that was a factor. And then it became another factor because my mom took me to visit my dad. He was on an army base in Kentucky, um, and they had a marching band that came through. It was an army base, and so they had the usual pomp and circumstances. And I could feel the drums inside of me. I remember not being able to get that feeling of the bass drum and the hard sticks, with the street beat, all of that, you know. Later on, my father would accuse me of having been vaccinated with a phonograph needle. So all of this was part of that. And I too, I had a medical training. So to speak, I would have been another Dr. Morrow had I not taken a left turn, so to speak.
Wow.
Doctor of Sound.
Yeah, sorry, Cherub. Do you have any questions at this?
I just said Doctor of Sound.
Oh,
I'll take that.
And likewise, I was thinking you feel music in your veins, literally. And so your phonograph reference was amazing, actually, because it says it all. Actually, you are embodiment of living music. I can see.
Well, it's interesting because in the course of Martyn and our relationship, we shared a love for doing immersive sound reproduction. That is what we call 3D sound, basically creating 3D soundscapes. Of course, we live in a world of 3D soundscapes, so we were 3D sound rats. Scoundrels. Yeah, that sound scoundrels. That's right. And so we were able to, with electronics, create that. And so the next stage for me right now has been to be able to create. I mean, first of all, I should mention that 3D sound is expensive. And in order to do it properly, it runs into something something quite dear, like I don't know. You'll spend $20K to do a really good room with 3D sound. So I have been approached to develop a product that was nowhere near that expensive, that would cost in the hundreds, and I have. So my team has been working on creating synthetic natural sound, which emulates natural sound, and mixing that with sound masking. We now have, we're doing tests at the Kaiser Permanente hospitals in the U.S., which is the largest private hospital chain. And everybody loves it because they feel that the sound masking sounds like a jet plane overhead, because they have to turn it way up in order to meet government specifications for privacy. I mean, the whole purpose of sound masking is so people's conversations aren't overheard. But in practice, sound masking is pretty awful. It's a type of noise. Even if people call it green noise, that's just a fiction. It's just an invariant sound. And I know that lots of folks these days feel that sound that doesn't change a lot is not natural. In nature, sound is always changing. And so, like, a typical example of that is if you go into the forest and suddenly all the animals are quiet. Well, they've gotten quiet because you're there.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
No. I'm just looking at your website, or the kind of biography on your website, and one thing really struck me. It says, as Morrow hears it, there are two musical universes running in parallel. The music in the outer world is a great soup, in which there is ambience, a sense of location, specific sounds. The other universe is the inner world, the music that's inside that comes to life when he hears music from the outside, or in the creation of music for that outside. The two work together towards fulfillment, inside, outside, or together. The inner music is in fact a kind of steady heartbeat that runs through your whole life, a beat that has its own dimension. That's very profound. Charlie, I only know you as a prankster.
I could also I should also be given to hot air, right? As a producer, I produce hot air. It's one of the products.
Charlie Morrow sound hot air generator. Good, actually. I think you could sell that.
I'd buy it.
It's a customer already.
It's probably got more intrinsic value than Dyson, anyway. Sorry, Cherub Tim, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I was the same, looking through your website and just amazed and inspired by all of the incredible projects that you've made. And one thing that really stood out to me is how you like to compose environments in real time. So you've actually, to quote you, moving out of the concert hall, which is so needed, because the concert hall in some ways is a dying art, especially in London. It's not something that people focus on as much as they should, but yet you're creating these living, breathing, resonant sonic worlds outside for the mass populace. And then so the sound that you're creating becomes like a vessel of cultural memory. And I've gone through there's too many projects to even touch on, because there's obviously decades of this here. But I think the main one for me that I'd love to ask you more on is the work that you did in the hospital, the pediatric soundscape, 2018. And I know you've just touched on it now, that you're still working in hospitals and generating this sound masking. But I would love to know more about what sound you used in that particular pediatric project that helped to generate a sense of calm and well-being for the children in the hospital.
Oh, that's a very good question. I like it, because when I first began doing this work, I thought I knew what I was doing. And I discovered
15.
that I really didn't. A large part, let's say, I think the biggest part of growing up as a musician has been to learn to be a better listener.
Yeah.
And particularly in the case of doing large-scale projects where people have, where you have stakeholders who have all the best intentions or all the worst. I mean, I was a jingle writer for quite a while. In a hospital, you discover that each one of the rooms has a purpose. And that is, in fact, thrilling. And that a lot of the way in which the room is, let's say, reviewed and approved, it's a working environment. It has to pass snuff on a lot of levels. So, for example, typical hospital environments must be cleanable so that you can remove contagion. So that means that the air system has to be special, and that the air system has to also be able to, deal with potential contagion, so people are not getting, as we often know, go to the hospital and get sick, right? So that's right there at the top, the cleanliness of a hospital, and particularly of the air. And since sound is being driven by air, we're part of the problem as well as part of the solution. So what I learned was, what were the expectations in the journey that all of the stakeholders would have? So one stakeholder is, in a pediatric hospital, parents coming with their children. When we worked at Nationwide Children's Hospital, we were told that they were the last port of call for many children, because they could be treated locally for most anything except the most horrible challenges. And so one of the features of that hospital, believe it or not, is a heliport on the top for rushing very, very ill children to their last hope. So that was, this is what I mean. We spent a lot of time learning what the hospital spaces were for. So the first ones that we were commissioned to work on, since we were invited by an exhibition design company, was the waiting room. And waiting rooms are very, very special. I mean, I'm not the only composer who has worked in waiting rooms. I think one of the thrilling, I think both Eno and Scanner have both worked with the Parisian waiting room, in which people came after car accidents, not knowing whether that person that had been in the accident with them would survive. They had the lowest survival rate of all, and that waiting room was a project for several of our colleagues. So in our waiting room there, though, the kids were waiting for treatment, and they would often come, so they'd be signing in. So part of the design of the room was that where people sign in, you'd have to hear very well. And we'd learned this from doing Marimekko stores. In a Marimekko store, we had the sound associated with making fabric, particularly the sound of water, because Marimekko prides itself on being a business that was a polluter in early days of dyeing fabrics, but became a clean water advocate. And so we had all the sounds of water, all the sounds of kitchenware and so forth, but not where people pay money. We would make that as quiet as possible so that people could concentrate. And so, for example, if we used 3D sound that would immerse them fully when they're buying something, we are entrancing them and seducing them. And the other way around, we're unwinding them so that they could concentrate on how much they're going to spend and putting the card in the slot.
Yeah, I did a similar project with a diamond store in America called Hearts on Fire, and it kind of made me itch a little bit, because I really am a communist actually at heart, but at very least, a socialist anyway. But we all have to make money. There's no way around it. I mean, nobody's going to give me the money, so we're going to get on with it. And I used to think, right, what is the purpose of this soundscape in a diamond shop? Is to keep people inside the shop and spend more money, really, and to plant subconsciously into their heads. I often get couples coming in to buy an engagement ring, A, to spend more money, and B, to exert some kind of promissory subconscious pressure on them that everything will turn out right if you spend this money. So we had a soundscape in 3D in all these stores, which was kind of futuristic, but it also had the sound of women sighing. So it was this promise that you're going to get some, right?
Ooh, sassy. I might start sighing around the house a
I
bit.
mean, I'm not beating about the bush, excuse the pun, but it's interesting, this kind of interstitial world between commerce and art, which both myself and Charlie have been really. You have to do it, but B, if you're gonna do it properly, you know, and do it effectively. And so that's another reason why, you know, Charlie is my guru, you know.
Well, coming then back to the Nationwide Children's Hospital, they would not have interference when signing in. But then we created, let's see, with the designers, an aviary, so to speak. What had interested them in my work and got me into this job was that I had worked for the Audubon Society in New York and had done an exhibition with 3D sounds, flocks of cranes that flew. You know, in 3D, Martyn can tell you that the natural laws of physics don't exist.
Yeah.
You can fly sound right through the floor, through the wall, through the ceiling. Sound is magical in that respect. You can create sonic illusions. And so we're basically sonic illusionists as well as mood makers and, as I often refer to us, Vaseline on the suppository of commerce.
Bravo, le mot juste.
So we created the sound of birds moving, and we actually got them to fly in their normal trajectories. I mean, this is, you know, when you do get a good assignment, then you can say, well, don't you think those birds should fly exactly they would do in nature, not just on and off? They're not a traffic light blinking on and off, going tweet tweet. They're, you know. They do this, so we were able to sell motion and so forth of the birds and the sound of them, and to be able to do that in such a way that it was never repeated. That was very important in all of our work too. Otherwise, you have a cuckoo clock and not a bird experience. So we did develop these motions and so forth. And then once we got it right, turns out they had engaged us to do a year of sound.
Wow.
They didn't want the cold weather. So the first thing you know, after they had it in for a month or so, they said, would you get rid of winter? And so after that,
Eternal summer, yeah.
Bring on the spring.
it became spring and summer, but just the back part of spring and the early part of fall. It was a selective experience, the refreshing spring, the lovely, relaxing summer, and so forth, because basically you're holding hands. I mean, we are there holding hands with parents while their children may or may not survive what they're there to
Yeah.
reach for. So I think the lessons I've learned with all of this also have brought me in contact with people that live with that every day. I mean, I think that one of the things that we as musicians have learned to do from the very beginning, I mean, music teaches you how to play together with another person. It's a really unique experience because the bigger the musical group, the more special listening and matching the groove and matching the spirit. And we spent a lot of time doing this social engineering as musicians. And so when we work in a hospital or retail and so forth, we meet a group of people who then want to, so to speak, play in our emotional and sonic playground with us. This is Martyn and I have both. We've been able to work in this field because basically we've learned how to play with others. We were the kids that, when we got a few friends together to play, actually enjoyed it.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, you know, I think we're both, well, in fact, Cherub and Tim as well, we're all highly empathetic and collaborative people. And I think if we weren't, I mean, I know some other people in this in a similar field who are more commerce driven, and it's not so much about the empathy for what's going on. It's about an imposition of style on a particular thing. But yeah, and the other thing is, Charlie, is I think we've kind of run parallel paths for the past 25 years. Is that no two projects are the same. I mean, even if you play the same content in a different space, the context is different. The space is different. The people who visit it are different. The city is different. It might be in the countryside. It might be in the open air. It might be indoors. It might be just for headphones. There's an endless variety, and you're never going to replicate the same thing ever.
That just goes to show the aliveness of the environment and the moment, that even if you did bring the same content to a different space, it just shows how much the space influences the music and vice versa, that almost every space that we work in, whether it's a hospital or a city park, they are themselves deep resonant spaces that have their own energy and vibration. And in a way, we're tuning into that when we're playing in them, whether you're creating the piece specifically for that or it's just the space that dictates the sound. And the theme that we're definitely beginning to see here with our podcast and all of these incredible experts and sound specialists that Martyn's magnetizing in, who you've worked with all these past years, it really mirrors the same ethos that Tim and I have been playing with the past 15 years for me and Tim together, decades for Tim, is that all we're essentially aiming to do with every soundscape, with every sonic landscape that we create, we're just aiming to align the listener to the natural rhythms of the earth. That's all we're all trying to do, is to bring people back to nature, really. And it's so amazing to hear that the soundscapes that you created in this specific hospital piece, the pediatric scape, that it's the natural soundscapes, isn't it, that what brings comfort and solace.
And also humor, though, because we, believe it or not, we were commissioned as well to, they made giant birdhouses. And so we made basically work with a mechanism maker to make these birds come out like in a cuckoo clock and give us various calls. So, I mean, so part of what we're doing is to create humor. And I think this is what we've learned, Martyn and I, from the work that we do, that if there isn't some knowingly funny bit somewhere, that then we failed, So I think this is, we've always got to have a twinkle in our eye when we are working on environments.
Exactly. Speaking of which, this leads us neatly into. It says on your thing. It says became a master at. You didn't write this, did you? A master at creating public music events, from the widely covered Concert for Fish, coinciding with the resignation of Richard Nixon, to Toot and Blink. Now, I need to know about this. So can you tell us about Toot and Blink?
Okay. Well, Toot and Blink is an event, outdoor event, that was done in Chicago first, back in the early 80s. I've done a number of city-size events, and this was for a kind of movable festival called New Music America, and this was New Music Chicago. So my piece involved 2 fleets of boats. Well, there were large craft tethered at Navy Pier that would that had horns and boat horns and radios. And then I invented a group called the Night Squadron. And the Night Squadron, I situated them beyond the horizon so that they could arrive. So the piece is based on a very simple adventure. It's we had the radio station involved that would treat it like we're live here at Navy Pier, and we're waiting for the Night Squadron. And so when they all finally got together, they had a big jam. So it was a really simple idea, but there was a sense of expectation. People were waiting to hear it. And the way we developed the expectation was through a script. We had 2 DJs, Joan LaBarbera and
It's 13:30.
and Richard, forgetting his last name, but the 2 of them bantered together, and then they say, "All right, may I hear?" Let's see. First, they introduced all the craft, said, and they would say, "And I'd like you to meet Captain so and so on the Albatross." "Okay, Captain, would you give us the sound of your horn?" And so we got them so that they would either toot or blink on command. And so finally it led to a big jam session of tooting and blinking. And of course, it had to be timed to the onset of darkness in summer Chicago, which, of course, Chicago being, fairly far north in the States. So the evening darkness came a little on the later side. So we had to, part of making these events is to study when the light changes so that you can do whatever lighting effects and sonic effects you can. So that was the piece. And
That's
was done live on the radio, and people treated it as a news event.
wow. Well, I must mention at this point that round about that time, although I knew you, sorry, no, I didn't know you at that point. What am I talking about? Not about 10 years later, before I met you, though, I had denied a similar idea for doing. As you know, I love Venice very much, and one night I was sat on a bench with a friend of mine who's a big fan of grappa, like I am, and I don't drink so much now, but I did back then, and we sat there polishing off a bottle of grappa, which is a very, very, for anybody listening, a terrible idea. And but
That's right, though.
at the time, it was a good idea. And we were watching the steamboats, the Vaporetti, on the Giudecca Canal. We just sat there on a bench for a couple of hours. And this is what the grappa did to us. It said, "I know what I'm going to do. For the next art biennale, we're going to rent some Vaporetti, and we're going to film it." This is before drones, by the way. God knows how we were going to do it. We're going to film it from a high vantage point, pulling one of the bell towers, and do it on a time lapse, and have choreographed Vaporetti dancing with each other at night, with special light installations on the top and stuff. So it reminded me a bit of that. That's all.
Wow.
I still think it's a good idea, actually.
All your ideas are good ideas.
Well, I don't know about now. Anyway, back to Charlie. What? Oh, right. I must mention, when I first met Charlie, went into his office, and he had a big poster on the wall. He's probably still got it, of that looked like a boxing poster from the 60s, like a Muhammad Ali poster. Where there are big block letters, Muhammad Ali versus blah blah blah. Well, it was Charlie Morrow, actually in boxing shorts and naked from the waist up, and who was the other guy? It was
There was Carlos Santos was my opponent from Barcelona, and Sten Hansen was the announcer, and Armand Schwerner was the referee. If you like, I happen to have the poster in the next room. If you
Oh yeah, could you?
You need to see it.
It's fantastic.
just a second.
Oh, fantastic. Anyway, while Charlie's doing that, I'll explain. And bear in mind, it's 5 minutes after I met him, and it's this big poster on the wall, and I'm going, "Were you a boxer?" And he said, "No, it was sound boxing." So this is when Charlie explained that he was a sound poet, as opposed to just a poet. So a poet in live performance in sound. And I'll let him. Here it is.
Here it is. A heavyweight sound fight. Ding, ding, ding.
It's so great. Even the colors are fantastic.
That is iconic. That is a boxing match I would pay to see.
Exactly. So I'll let you take over, Charlie, if you want to explain what the hell was going on.
Sure, happy to do that. And also to pump the fact that this is available.
Is it?
A double record set by the Swedish label Ideal. They just put it out last year, and what we did was it's 2 LPs, and it's the audio from this event. So it's an event in which it runs like an opera. I mean, it's basically the boxing match, and then we have we fought with sounds like, and we had little dances between each of the rounds. We had a dancer, Simone Forte, do round dancing. We had Jean Dupuis, the French artist, made beautiful round cards, and every detail of it was in fact.
In a real boxing ring, right?
We did it, yes, definitely in a real boxing ring, and we had a real crowd there. It had
When was it?
fun
When did it take place?
in the early '80s.
Wow.
The amazing thing was that Santos, that was as a joke, we had judges, and they judged that I won, and Santos was so pissed that he never talked to me for the rest of his life.
Serious match.
It was a serious match. And the other part of it was we were invited to do this match in Paris, but Santos, being closer, being in Barcelona, talked the promoters into giving him the money to do something of his own, so
We lose again.
he stole the match from us.
Oh man!
I demand a rematch.
Yeah, we need a rematch. It's a bit late now, perhaps, but
Yeah, a little too late. There's very few of us alive.
maybe,
Get the
maybe it's a new generation, Charlie. Maybe we need to get some. It's like Star Trek: The Next Generation.
That'll be great. I think so. I think these kind of events should definitely great.
Martyn Ware versus Charlie Morrow.
No,
July.
no, I don't think so. My son could do it.
Yeah,
He could definitely do it. He's like built, So
it's got well, maybe my daughter could box him.
there you go. Well, why not?
Wow, intergenerational.
Interdisciplinary.
She's just over in North Amsterdam, so you wouldn't be hard to arrange that. She's in London.
How old is she?
How old? 36.
26, right? And Gable's 27. So it'd be a catchweight contest.
Can I be the girl that holds the card up in between each round?
Yeah,
There you
and
Fantastic. We got the casting going.
Tim's the judge. Tim and Martyn on the judging panel.
and I've got a best of interest. It would have to be some neutral sound artists. Anyway, yeah, sorry.
I was going to ask, you were obviously around in the 60s, and it must have been an amazing creative time as a musician. Were you inspired by other composers and artists? I mean, obviously, you have a connection to John Cage, I believe. Is that correct? And
That's true. Yeah, we were friends and colleagues. But the community in New York at that time was very international. A lot of people came to New York because in the 60s, it was cheap to live there. One could get along on very little money and find a place, to live either close or far, depending on the rent. And there was lots of interesting energy particularly for doing collective things and for taking seriously ideas. People, were interested in each other's ideas. So it was a social environment that I think exploded then internationally, because after the 60s and the 70s, most of that spirit lived even better elsewhere. New York rapidly gentrified, and for example, when I was first doing public events, I was an event maker for the city of New York, doing public events that would often bring artists into the park whose neighbors would be curious what they're doing, and suddenly they could be seen on a stage in the park. The park had become very dangerous. There were street gangs there, and so the city was paying money to do concerts there, and then they would come in with and make, with police just to make a steady presence, and you could bring families there. So as long as we were doing something that could populate the parks with fun, there was money. But by the time it got to be the 80s or so, the only people that could be there would be Coca-Cola buying a stage to promote whoever's, a top artist that would have a heavy draw, because it was all, by then, marketing.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about, I mean, you were obviously around in the 60s and the 70s. Were you inspired by other composers and artists?
Sure. Yeah, we were friends and colleagues. But
some of your other projects, and I'm thinking about. Well, we did a project together where there was a big 3D sound festival.
Yes.
But also, you're friends with Laurie Anderson, aren't you? That's what I was going to ask. So tell us about your association with somebody I admire very much.
Well, I've known Laurie Anderson much better in her earlier years. I haven't been in touch with her very much over the last 20 years or so. But
Right.
let's see, first of all, my base in Lower Manhattan is the Ear Inn. And Rip Heyman, who's my partner in crime, a sea captain as well as a musician, is also the owner of the Ear Inn with an Irish partner who's Martyn Sheridan, who had managed a number of large, big time bands. And so Martyn and Rip have run this neighborhood bar, which is still open. It's the oldest bar in the city. And Laurie lived around the corner. I mean, this was just a neighborhood experience. And so we all know each other because we met at the Ear Inn or were walking in the park next to the Hudson River and so forth. Laurie was in a number of events of ours. One of the things that Rip and I did was publish Ear Magazine, which is a collective journal of artists writing about and for each other, as opposed to, say, a fanzine where people would we'd have music journalists writing about somebody. But here we were more exchanging ideas and scores and so forth. And Laurie was definitely part of that. I mean, you can find in Ear Magazine, Laurie's pieces for sound tape embedded in closet doors, that as you slide your closet doors, you hear music, or descriptions of her standing on a block of ice, playing a violin, and as it melted, I mean, she a really fanciful and magical performance artist who, as well, got into making songs and became an act.
Yeah, this thing about the combination of performance art. This is very much from that period. The combination of performance art and music is kind of somewhat atrophied now into international attention. I think it needs to really come back. I mean, there are some artists, like Björk, and there's other people who are still doing it, but not so much on a kind of low level, if you know what I mean. On a kind of ground level, it's all kind of fancy, 1,000 projections and costumes and all that stuff. Another thing I want to talk to you about is, and I never dug deep into this, but you told me about it, is when you went to stay with a Native American community. Is that right? To learn about their sound rituals. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it's a very big subject with me because I had studied ethnomusicology as part of my training, and I was very interested in it because I like vocal music, and I had been experienced. I grew up in a town, Passaic, New Jersey, which had more different kinds of churches and synagogues than practically any place on earth, and so you could hear a great variety of music, singing, and also band music, because there was a lot of parades of name day saints and so forth. So it starts back in New Jersey, where various communities, intermingled. We were all kids in the same high school, but then we had small communities from all over the world that practiced their old stuff and then newer stuff. So from that, I developed a real interest in what music does as a functional item. And I think that as the American tribal society had calendars of events, that was what really drew me to them, that every the holiday cycle that I'd learned about in European churches and synagogues was even bigger in terms of the native communities around the states. And of course, the states being big and in fact, both North and South America, very diverse cultures with all different
It's 13:45.
kinds of sound. So in my professional life, I became friends with a guy named Willard Rhodes. He was my teacher. And what Willard could do, he had absolutely fantastic ear for transcription. He studied in music in Mexico, particularly the Mexican Indians, and he's famous for having published the music of Maria Sabina, who was a magic person. He was in Africa, and he studied that music. And what Willard could do, which very few people can do, he could write it down as fast as he heard it. It was unbelievable. I knew people around jazz who could do that, but he was a transcriber, and I understood from Willard that he was deeper into music than anybody I'd ever met. And he inspired me because what drew him to it was just his inside-outside experience and his ability as a transcriber to take what he heard and capture it, not as a recording, but I mean, as writing down the notes as well. So from Willard, I was inspired, and so my next relationship that grew from that was a poet, Jerome Rothenberg, and Jerry and I worked together from the time we met until just last year when Jerry passed away, and he was the center of my artistic life. We formed the New Wilderness Foundation. We did publications. Ear Magazine was published under New Wilderness Foundation. We did world celebrations under the name of New Wilderness Solstice events, where I began to put together state broadcasters and swap shows in order to create celebrations. But Rothenberg immediately brought me into the communities he was working with. He was working with the Iroquois at the time, which are the upstate New York Indians, famous, by the way, in terms of its relationship to social theory. Engels wrote about the social organization of the Iroquois and how they got along and ran themselves as a community for the benefit of the entire community. And so he was describing communism on an American level as a model for social organization, and inspired a lot of what followed because Engels worked with Marx. And so I managed to tap into some of these really basic springs of feelings about how a community should function, what the music should do. And Rothenberg got me up to visit him. He was working upstate New York with the Iroquois. And so I learned what a song was about. Songs are done collectively around a drum, everybody beating a drum. And so I sat in with singing societies and just began to have a feeling of what it meant to be a cog in the wheel, a wonderful cog in the wheel, and how ceremonies could be made from songs, because the Native Americans get together for powwows, and various singing societies will have a chance to play for each other. And there was always an announcer who said, and now...
MC. Yeah.
MC. I went to, at one point, I was working as I'd been a soundtrack maker for Paul Anders Sima, who's a maker of feature films from Lapland, Assami. And he was invited to a Canadian festival of what's an international media festival, all native media makers. And there was a powwow.
Wow.
And then I remember being announced, and now from the society in New York City, Charlie Morrow. Became just another guy from another location singing and dancing.
Wow.
But my whole relationship to all this, was as a recordist, as learning to sing with them, and being part of the community, because the community life was so special. And it also led to these international broadcasts, because I was able, in my international broadcasts, I brought together people around the Polish Circle and traveled around to meet various people who have been in these jams. So my media making and tied together with this interest.
How beautiful is that? What did you perform?
Depends on which, because there's been many. Let's see, one of my favorite performances was in New York, piece for 100 musicians with lights. and these were drummers and wind instruments that could march. And so I formed a spiral of 100 musicians with lights, and I had a local Indian fellow from Long Island sing a blessing song, and that then set the rhythm. It was gadum, gadum, and that then went through 100 players, and then a melody started. Then they all broke apart in groups of 20 circles, and they went playing out of Central Park all the way to their homes.
Oh my goodness.
Can we see that anywhere? Was it recorded?
Yes, it's on XI label. You can hear a big section of it. It's quite wonderful.
Is there any film?
It's on Spotify.
Is there any film of it?
No, there was no film of it.
Oh, boo.
I think there was a small, there was this, Arlene Schloss did a film, and it might be on her website. I regret very much, I had the offer of major filmmakers to record it, but I didn't have the money to pay them at the time. I feel it's one of the missed opportunities I truly regret.
That's a pity, isn't it? Because it must have looked amazing.
It did. They were like fireflies.
Yeah, what I really admire about your curatorship is you can do things that are very intimate and impactful and resonant for a small number of people, but you also think very big in terms of spectacle, and that's a rare thing, a really rare thing, because normally the people who think big in terms of spectacle are kind of people who design theatre shows or operas, or I remember going to see an opera at the Verona Amphitheatre, and it was Franco Zeffirelli doing Aida.
It must have been grand.
Oh my God, he's insane. There were the opening scene had, I think, probably about 70 or 80 people on stage. But not just that, donkeys, dogs, cats, people playing musical instruments, you name it, lots of different types of animals. It was like, this is like, how are you going to ever get better than this the first 10 minutes? And of course, anyway, what I'm saying is that is the sort of scale on which you've imagine just conceptualizing the thing like your boat piece, or I can't imagine it. I don't think on that level. I'm just full of awe, frankly. Awe, you see. But anyway, I know I'm blowing smoke up your ass, Charlie, but I really just am such an admirer of your work. Do you have any questions, Cherub Tim, or anything?
It's more of a comment of just how amazing it is for the people that are going to be listening from our network, who are generally going to be more in the sound healing sphere, who I think sometimes it can be quite a rigid industry in a way, because one must really start to think outside the box to really generate awareness for the healing and transformational powers of sound. And lots of our sound healers might be stuck within this framework of healing sound being in one niche, and then music and entertainment and sound installations being dotted somewhere else, and sound healers not feeling like they're part of that conversation. But just listening to you and seeing how that over many decades you have actually sculpted space with sound, and very rarely from a position of entertainment, but to transform spaces and people, and very impactful places like hospitals, creating these immersive healing environments. And ultimately, it's the same thing that sound healers are doing, but on a smaller scale. So I just, not much of a question, but just a statement and a comment to all our sound healer listeners out there that take inspiration, admire and explore Charlie's work, and just see what social impact you can create with the transformational gift of sound power that you have, so that we can all start to blend and merge these worlds. And that's what I love so much about this podcast, is it's really shining a light on those that are doing outside of the box musical experimentation, and you're a classic example of that. And yeah, an absolute legend. And I cannot wait for our community to be introduced to your work.
And I'd like to just say what an extraordinary sonic visionary you obviously are, and a master of medicine music in so many ways and breadths. So it is just terrific to hear your stories. And quite frankly, it's gone far too quickly.
Yeah.
And
Well, I'll tell you, we'll do part 2 in the not too distant future, because we hardly scraped a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's more I want to know too.
Yeah, I mean, one final story is when I asked Charlie over to do our Future of Sound tour, when we asked different practitioners to imagine how they'd use immersive sound. And Charlie opened the show. And he walked down from the back of the audience onto stage with a giant conch shell and making the most amazing noises. And then you showed the audience this amazing sound and movement ritual. Can you describe that to us? Because I think you do it better than me, actually, Charlie.
I think I did my greeting piece. It's something that I've done for a long time. I combine gesture with with sound making. I could do a greeting piece right now.
Sure.
Yes, please.
My pleasure.
You're trying you are really lobbying hard to be the very first episode of SoundPower at this point, because I'm gonna think of a better one. Can you guys? I don't think.
It all starts with Charlie Morrow.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, go ahead, Charlie. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I did was I brought together a couple of different gestural hellos. It's that simple with voice, and so let's see if this works. If I can step back so you can see me.
Yeah.
This particular piece, I use the full body, so
Yeah.
at least I can.
That's good.
Okay. Oh.
Oh. Oh. Oh. Wow. That yeah, I can only replicate what the audience response was. He actually went through the sequence twice with sound, and then he encouraged the audience to understand what was going on when he did it without sound, and said you will be able to hear. Once he'd reinforced it again, you were literally able to hear exactly what was going on without actually him uttering a sound. It's a very profound thought, isn't it?
And also the silence after the sound is where all of that sound encapsulates, and creating that space for us to breathe into that experience. How do we change government legislation so that becomes the official greeting? I want to do that all day, every day.
I somehow don't think Keir Starmer's going to be doing that anytime soon. Considering he's got completely dead eyes.
I think just him experiencing that might bring a bit of life and spirit back into his eyes. Let's get this greeting to him.
I doubt it. I know him very well. Charlie, you are just a superstar, as you know, and I'm honoured to have you as my friend. I'm coming over, which we just arranged today, actually. I'm coming over to see you in Helsinki, you and Mylena. And we'll carry on this conversation, albeit unrecorded. but we'll definitely do part 2 in the not too distant future. Just want to ask you a couple of questions that I'm asking all the guests. So, what's your what's the favorite of your work?
I mean, my favorite of all my works?
Yeah. There's plenty to pick from, I know, but
It's a big question. I guess it's always the latest one that I've done.
right, there you go. Okay. Yeah, go. Which is
The latest one that I've done was Sound Circus, which just closed yesterday. It was a gallery show of our podcast installations of it. Our designer had done album covers for a number of the shows that we did podcasts. So you as podcasters could, I'm telling you about this because I thought it would interest you, because I'd like to expand gallery shows around the podcast. And then I did a live event called Sound Circus, where I had a circus band and we did 3D sound in a large open square. The city of Helsinki supported an event as a summer free event for family. We wanted to keep it light, and so it was very humorous, but with rather dark sound events in between the light, bright, funny ones. And then inside we had drawings for each one of the pieces. How do you make an event? What does an event look like? And so we had an event, we had a show of event scores. So
oh,
people could hear, interviews, they could see all the event scores, and then they could have seen the live show. We shot the live show with one of the best shooters here from the TV, and we're going to put it all together as for our podcast as we start to work with video. We've been all sound up till now, but for the movement into of Immerse with Charlie Morrow, we're going to be doing video ones with this being a kind of spectacle.
yeah, go and listen to Charlie's podcast, Immerse! Exclamation mark. It's exceptional. Okay, next question. What's your favorite natural sound?
My favorite natural sound is, I hear this in my home in North Vermont, is the sound of the wind coming from the trees from a distance. It's almost like a freight train, softer, and then the wind just shows up and it blows on by and it keeps going. I don't think anything has ever startled me as much as that. And I welcome it when I hear it. And at times it scares me because we also are starting to experience small tornadoes in the district because of climate change. So it's got a double meaning.
Wow, that's incredible. What piece of music or sound design has a kind of, do you remember a kind of transcendental moment? It didn't have to, I mean, obviously might happen all the time to you if you're lucky, but I don't know, it could be something from a sound piece or an opera or a musical performance or whatever.
That's a hard one.
I know it is, because there's so much that affects us. It's only because, as I mentioned on another podcast, there was a moment when I was watching Janacek's Yanufo where I just felt like all my emotions were amplified by 100. It was just so incredible. The music, it was all the music. What I was looking at. Anyway, just thought I'd...
Well, for me, my favorite is actually one that I did. It's my most popular jingle for Hefty Bags, and it goes like this: Hefty, 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 wimpy, wimpy, wimpy. And people have used this as a cheer, okay, and so forth.
I want that as my ringtone. I love it.
Well, you can. We'll just take the recording and you can... Thank you for taking that question seriously, Charlie. Okay, and here's the last question, which is, what gives you most hope for the future in this field?
I think
I know we haven't got much future left. I'm just saying.
Well, I think it's the fact that human beings have a lifespan. That gives me a lot of hope. Eventually, no matter who they are, they come to an end, and there's a new crop. I think there's hope.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Well, Charlie, this is just going to be part 1. It's been absolutely brilliant. I lobby now that this should be episode 1. What do you think, guys?
I agree. And I just want to end on one of the most impactful things you've said that started this podcast. You said vibrations over time spell our life.
Yeah.
I love
Big.
Mm.
Big. Thanks, Charlie. I'll see you in a few weeks. And thank you, everyone,
Thank you.
for this amazing episode. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Charlie.
Nice to meet you.